What happens when the player-jealous veterans once tried to minimize doesn't just survive the noise, but transcends it entirely? What happens when the athlete some insisted was overhyped, overcovered, and overpraised suddenly steps onto a platform so powerful it forces the entire basketball world to recalibrate? That's exactly what unfolded when Caitlin Clark was officially announced as a special contributor for NBC Sports' new Basketball Night in America broadcast, joining a lineup that includes names synonymous with NBA greatness. This wasn't a sideline cameo. It wasn't a quick halftime hit or a social media experiment. Clark is stepping into primetime national television tied directly to the NBA, appearing ahead of marquee matchups and seated alongside icons like Carmelo Anthony, Tracy McGrady, and Vince Carter, with veteran broadcaster Maria Taylor anchoring the desk. Her debut is set for February 1st at Madison Square Garden, just before the Lakers face the Knicks, one of the most iconic matchups in professional basketball. NBC didn't hide her in a quiet time slot. They put her directly in front of millions. And that's what makes this moment historic. Clark becomes the first active WNBA player to step into this kind of NBA-linked analyst role on such a prestigious stage. In one move, she crossed into territory that no one in her league has reached while still playing. The symbolism is impossible to ignore. For 2 seasons, critics insisted Clark wasn't the reason ratings surged. They argued that ticket sales rising across arenas had nothing to do with her presence. They downplayed the viral clips, the sold-out road games, the mainstream conversations spilling into sports bars and office break rooms. Veteran players openly pushed back on the idea that one rookie could reshape the league's visibility. Some mocked new fans for only tuning in to watch her. Others framed the attention as manufactured. But while that debate raged publicly, NBC quietly made a decision that spoke louder than any press conference ever could. They placed her front and center. Major networks don't gamble on sentiment. They invest in audience pull. They analyze metrics, engagement, crossover appeal. And what NBC saw was simple. Clark moves the needle. Not slightly, dramatically. She draws casual viewers, younger demographics, and people who previously never watched a WNBA broadcast. She doesn't just bring basketball purists. She brings curiosity. She brings conversation. And that's where things grow uncomfortable. While Clark steps into elite NBA media circles, the WNBA is navigating tense labor negotiations and heated CBA discussions. Veteran players are publicly pushing for dramatic salary increases, citing rising revenues as justification. Yet the very revenue spike they're leaning on coincided with Clark's arrival. That's the paradox. The same player some minimized is now being rewarded by the broader market at a level that exposes the contradiction. NBC didn't consult union politics. They didn't weigh locker room sentiment. They recognized value and acted. Reports suggest Clark's compensation for this role could exceed the annual salary of many WNBA contracts. Not because she staged protests. Not because she leveraged public pressure. But because networks believe her presence justifies the investment. The market decided. And the comparison many insiders are whispering about is telling. When Michael Jordan became synonymous with brand power decades ago, networks and sponsors understood instantly that visibility equaled opportunity. Clark's NBC placement carries a similar energy. Not because her career mirrors Jordan's, but because her cultural magnetism forces expansion. For 2 seasons, some veterans claimed she was simply benefiting from media favoritism. Yet if that were the case, why would one of the most established sports broadcasters in America build part of its NBA rollout strategy around her presence? Why pair her with Hall of Famers if she weren't credible? Why debut her at Madison Square Garden in front of one of the largest audiences possible? Because credibility isn't handed out lightly in that room. Clark's basketball IQ has never been questioned. Even critics acknowledge her court vision, her understanding of spacing, tempo, and defensive manipulation. Transitioning into analysis isn't a novelty for her. It's an extension of how she already sees the game. NBC isn't positioning her as a novelty act. They're positioning her as a voice. Meanwhile, back in league circles, negotiations remain strained. Public statements have grown sharper. Some analysts warn that unrealistic financial demands risk alienating fans. There's frustration brewing online, particularly from supporters who remember being mocked for discovering the league through Clark's rise. They remember the eye rolls, the dismissive tone, the sense that their enthusiasm wasn't welcome. Now those same fans are being asked to back aggressive salary proposals. The optics are difficult. Complicating matters further are discussions around potential conflicts of interest involving union leadership figures and external league ventures. Online debate has intensified over whether personal business interests could be influencing labor strategy. Whether or not those concerns hold weight, perception alone has shifted public tone from confusion to skepticism. And in the middle of that turbulence stands Clark, moving quietly upward. She didn't threaten a season. She didn't shame fans. She didn't posture. She delivered performances that forced national conversation, then stepped into a media role that confirms her broader impact. While others argue about leverage, she creates it. That distinction is critical. Clark's NBC role isn't just a personal achievement. It's a signal flare about how influence works in modern sports. Leagues may control contracts. Unions may negotiate structure. But attention belongs to the athlete who captures it. And attention drives everything. When Sophie Cunningham once compared Clark's arrival to a once-in-a-generation cultural phenomenon, it sounded hyperbolic to some. Now, with prime-time NBA exposure attached to her name, it feels prophetic. There are players who move the needle. And then there are players who become the needle. As February 1st approaches, millions will tune in to watch Lakers versus Knicks. But before tip-off, they'll see Caitlin Clark at the desk, analyzing the game alongside legends whose jerseys hang in rafters. The image alone speaks volumes. It tells young players what's possible. It tells executives what matters. It tells skeptics that the market has already rendered its verdict. And it leaves one pressing question hovering over the entire basketball world. If an active WNBA player can command this level of NBA stage presence, what does that mean for the future of women's sports media? Is this the beginning of a new era where league boundaries blur and individual brands eclipse institutional limitations? Or will resistance harden as power structures attempt to reassert